family barbecue, my daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone, calling me the curse that destroyed our family. She must have forgotten one small detail. I'm the one paying their mortgage. I'm so glad you're here. Stay with me until the end and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story travels. The summer air was thick with the smell of grilled burgers and roasted corn as I set paper plates on the patio table. At 62, I still took pride in hosting these gatherings, little traditions that made us feel like a family, even when life pulled us in different directions. My backyard wasn't grand, but it was filled with care. Flowers freshly watered, lawn trimmed, every detail just right. "Mom, where do you want these?" Michael, my son, appeared with 2 heavy bags of ice. "In the cooler, sweetheart," I said, smoothing my blouse. Even at 40, he still had that same smile that reminded me of his late father. I watched him walk over to Susan, his wife of 15 years, who stood by the grill with her back turned toward me. They were late, as usual. I'd long stopped mentioning it. Susan's polite smile never quite reached her eyes. I had given up hoping for a close mother-daughter bond. I turned toward the kitchen for the salad when her voice drifted across the yard, sharp, dismissive, and meant to stay unheard. "It's always the same," Susan complained. "These fake family dinners, pretending we're all happy. She's the curse that ruined our lives. Always hovering, always judging, always using her money to control us." I froze. My hand gripped the screen door. The money. The mortgage payments I'd been quietly covering for 8 years. The down payment I'd scraped together by selling my late husband's classic car collection, the only thing he ever asked me to keep. When I turned around, Michael's face was pale. Susan followed his gaze, startled but unapologetic. "The curse that ruined your lives?" I repeated, my voice trembling yet steady. "That's what I am to you?" "Mom, she didn't mean," Michael began. "I heard exactly what she meant," I said, cutting him off. My eyes locked with Susan's. "That curse has been paying your mortgage for 8 years, but don't worry, I won't ruin your lives any longer." I set the salad bowl down gently, walked through the house, grabbed my purse, and left. No one followed. No one called my name. In my car, behind closed doors, the tears came all at once, quiet at first, then unstoppable. I waited for Michael to come after me. He didn't. When I finally drove away, I glanced through the fence. The barbecue was still going, as if I'd never been there. Back home, the silence was deafening. I wandered through the empty rooms of the house I'd kept for decades, the same house I once believed would keep my family close. Sitting on my bed, I stared at the photo of my late husband, his easy smile, my hopeful eyes. "What would you do, Jim?" I whispered. But only the clock answered. I had given everything, my youth, my savings, my dreams of traveling, all for family. But now, sitting alone while they laughed without me, I finally wondered if love and sacrifice had been enough, or if I'd simply given too much. 3 days passed before my phone rang, 3 days of silence. When I saw Michael's name on the screen, I let it ring 5 times before I picked up. "Mom?" His voice broke slightly, and that was the beginning of the moment everything changed. "Susan wants to apologize." Not, "I want to apologize," not, "I'm sorry for not standing up for you," just, "Susan wants to apologize." "Does she?" I asked, my voice flat. "She was just having a bad day," Michael replied quickly. "You know how she gets when she's stressed about money." "Money! It always came back to money." I closed my eyes and thought back to the day Jim died. Michael had been 20, halfway through college. I was 42, suddenly a widow with half the income and a mortgage to pay. There had been no choice. I went back to work the very next day, picking up extra shifts at the hospital so Michael could stay in school. "Mom, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said quietly, opening the drawer of my desk, the one where I kept all the important papers. "Michael, do you remember when you and Susan wanted to buy that house, the one you live in now?" He hesitated. "Of course. Do you remember what the bank said?" Another pause. "They said we didn't qualify for the loan." And what did I do? Mom, this isn't... What did I do, Michael? He sighed. You put down $50,000 for the down payment, and you co-signed the loan. I didn't just co-sign, I reminded him. I'm the primary borrower. The house is in my name because your credit was so bad back then. I pulled out the mortgage statement, though I already knew every number by heart. I've been making the payments for 8 years. That's more than $150,000. He said nothing for a moment, then exhaled sharply. We've just been going through a rough patch. Susan's business isn't doing great, and the kids need a lot these days. I pictured my grandchildren, Emma and Thomas, 8 and 6, sweet, bright faces I hadn't seen in nearly a month, even though they lived only 20 minutes away. Remember when you called me at 2 in the morning because Susan's car broke down and you needed $4,000 for a new transmission? Or when Thomas needed braces and your insurance wouldn't cover it? Or when Emma wanted ballet lessons? Are you keeping score now? Is that what this is about? His tone hardened. The edge in his voice sounded so much like Susan. No, Michael, I said softly. It's not about keeping score. It's about respect, about appreciation. So what, we're supposed to bow down and thank you every day because you helped us out? Is that what you want? For us to feel like we owe you forever? His words hit like a physical blow. That's not what I meant. Maybe Susan was right, he said sharply. You do hold that money over us. I thought of Dorothy, my oldest friend, and her warning years ago. You're raising a man who thinks he's entitled to your help, she had said after I paid off Michael's credit card debt for the 3rd time. I'd defended him back then, said she didn't understand. Now I wondered if I was the one who hadn't understood. I never asked for gratitude, I said quietly. Just respect. Well, I'm sorry if you don't feel respected, he said, his tone making it painfully clear he wasn't sorry at all. But Susan's stressed. The kids need things, and we're drowning here, Mom. I recognized the pattern, the guilt, the shift from blame to need. It was the same dance we'd done for years. How much? The question came out automatically. What? How much do you need this time? There was a pause. Then, 8,000, just to catch up on bills. We'll pay you back, I promise. The same promise I'd heard a dozen times before. I closed my eyes and heard Jim's voice in my head. You can't pour from an empty cup, Em. I'd been pouring from an empty cup for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. I need some time, I said finally. Time? Mom, these bills are due now. I need time to think. About everything. About this relationship, about what it's costing me. Costing you? He repeated, his tone sharp with disbelief. Is that what we are to you? A cost? We're your family, Mom. Your only family. The words hung in the air, heavy, guilt-laden, and sharp. Family. The word that had once been my anchor now felt like a chain. I have to go, I said, my voice trembling with exhaustion. Mom? I hung up before he could say more, before he could pull me back into the same cycle I'd been trapped in for years. Family was supposed to lift you up, not drain you dry. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by photo albums. Michael as a toddler, grinning with a missing tooth, his high school graduation, his wedding day with Susan, her smile tight even then, Christmases, birthdays, summer trips, moments I'd once believed were proof of love. Now they looked like evidence of denial. My phone buzzed, a text from Dorothy. Coffee today? Dorothy had been my closest friend for 30 years, ever since we'd worked the same hospital floor. She'd seen me through everything, Jim's death, Michael's teenage rebellion, the long years of holding everything together. An hour later, we sat in her sunroom, sunlight spilling over the table. I've been worried about you, she said, studying my face. Janet told me what happened at the barbecue. I looked out at her garden. Did you know, Dorothy? Did you know how they really felt about me? She hesitated, and in that silence, I had my answer. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. Dorothy sighed. I tried, Emma. God knows I tried. Remember 3 years ago, when you paid for their kitchen renovation? Of course I remembered. $30,000 taken straight from my retirement fund. I told you then, Dorothy continued, They were taking advantage of you. But you said I was being paranoid. You said Susan was just misunderstood. I said Susan was just misunderstood, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You wanted to believe they cared, she said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You didn't want to see the truth. I thought back to that renovation. Susan had shown me the design plans, granite countertops, custom cabinetry, a wine fridge, luxuries I'd never had in my own kitchen. When I gently suggested something simpler, she had looked at me with disappointment. Michael said you were excited to help, she'd told me, but if you can't afford it. And of course, I'd written the check the very next day. Dorothy's voice brought me back. When was the last time they invited you over for dinner? I hesitated. When was the last time Michael called just to ask how you were, not to ask for money? I tried to think. I couldn't remember. They visit on holidays, I said weakly. Which holidays? Dorothy pressed. Christmas, when you give them gifts? Thanksgiving, when you cook the entire meal yourself? Her words hit like truth I'd been avoiding for years. I stared into my coffee, unable to meet her eyes. Emma, Dorothy said gently, you deserve better than this. After leaving Dorothy's, I found myself driving past Michael and Susan's house. The two-story colonial looked like a magazine cover, perfect lawn, fresh paint, flower beds trimmed by the landscaping service I paid for. I slowed as I approached. Susan's brand-new SUV gleamed in the driveway, another emergency I'd covered 6 months ago when her old car had supposedly become unsafe for the kids. As I watched, Susan stepped outside, dressed in tennis whites, her blonde hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She laughed as she climbed into her car, carefree, radiant, not the image of someone drowning in bills. Something inside me shifted, something cold and certain. I drove away before she could see me. That evening, I sat at my computer and opened my banking records. For the first time, I let myself look, really look, at the numbers. Over the past decade, I had given Michael and Susan over $300,000, not including the mortgage payments. $300,000. My savings, my security, my future, gone. And for what? To be called a plague. My phone buzzed on the desk. Michael's name. I let it go to voicemail. A text followed almost instantly. Mom, did you think about what we talked about? The bills are due Friday. No apology, no, how are you? Just another request. I set the phone face down and didn't respond. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on my porch, his expression somewhere between concern and impatience. Mom, are you okay? You didn't answer my calls. I'm fine, I said, keeping the door half closed. He shifted his weight. Look, about the other day, Susan feels really bad about what happened. Does she? I asked quietly. Or do you just need that money? His face tightened. That's not fair, Mom. We're really in a tough spot. Property taxes are due and Emma needs a new laptop for school. And when was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? I asked. Not to ask for money, not to drop the kids off, just to check on your mother. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. We've been busy, he muttered. Too busy to call, I said, but not too busy to ask for $8,000. Color rose in his cheeks. If you're trying to make me feel guilty. I'm not trying to make you feel anything, I said wearily. I'm just telling the truth. We stood there for a long moment, silence heavy between us. So you're not going to help us? He finally asked. I didn't say that, I replied. I said I needed time. We don't have time, Mom. The bills are due. Friday? Yes, you mentioned that. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what you want from me. I looked at him, this grown man I had sacrificed everything for, and felt an ache so deep it almost hollowed me out. That's exactly the problem, Michael, I said softly. You don't know what I want. You've never asked. I closed the door gently and leaned against it, listening to his footsteps fade down the walkway. The next morning I made a decision. Instead of replying to the flood of texts that came overnight, I called my bank and scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor. It was time to face reality. "Mrs. Reynolds," the advisor said as she scanned through my accounts, her brow furrowing deeper with every click, "your retirement savings are far below where they should be." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I've had some family expenses." She turned the screen toward me. Graphs and projections filled the monitor, lines dipping lower and lower. "At this rate," she said carefully, "you'll run out of savings within 5 years of retirement." My throat tightened. The mortgage payments on Michael's house had become a slow, silent drain, bleeding my accounts dry month after month. "Do you have any other assets?" she asked gently. "Just my house," I said. "I own it outright." She smiled faintly. "Well, that's something." I nodded, though inside, a single thought echoed louder than all the rest. It was time to stop saving everyone else. It was time to save myself. "But Mrs. Reynolds," she said gently, folding her hands on the desk, "I have to be honest with you. If you want any financial stability in retirement, you'll need to make some serious changes." I left the bank with a folder full of grim projections and a knot tightening in my stomach. Sitting in my car, I stared at the papers on the passenger seat, charts, numbers, warnings. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up my phone and called the mortgage company that held the loan on Michael's house. "I'd like to understand my options," I told the representative after verifying my identity. "If I wanted to remove myself from this mortgage, what would that process look like?" The woman on the other end explained, calm but matter of fact. The other borrowers would need to qualify for the loan on their own, or refinance it in their name. If they can't, and payments stop, the property would typically go into foreclosure. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling slightly. Michael and Susan would never qualify for that loan. Their credit was still a mess, and Susan's boutique, her so-called business, was barely staying afloat. I needed more answers, so I drove to the county clerk's office. The records confirmed what I already feared. The house was legally mine, the mortgage, the deed, all under my name. Michael and Susan were only secondary owners, their signatures added at the end of paperwork they barely read. On the way home, I passed by their street again. At first glance, everything looked the same. The perfect lawn, the flower beds, the clean white porch. But then I noticed something new. A lawn sign for a landscaping company I didn't recognize. Had they finally started paying for their own maintenance? Then I saw it, a pool company truck parked in the driveway. A pool. They were installing a pool while claiming they couldn't pay their bills. I pulled over a block away, heart pounding. Through a gap in the hedge, I could see Susan standing in the backyard with a man in a suit, examining blueprints. She was laughing, relaxed, confident. Not a trace of stress or worry. $8,000 for emergency bills while planning a pool installation. A cold wave of anger swept over me. Not hot, not explosive, just quiet and sharp, the kind that changes something inside you forever. When I got home, I called Robert, an old family friend and real estate attorney. "Emma, it's been too long," he greeted warmly. "How are you?" "I need legal advice," I said, cutting straight to the point. "It's about a house I co-own with my son." 20 minutes later, I understood the situation more clearly than ever. "Because your name is on both the mortgage and the deed," Robert explained, "you have certain rights, but also big liabilities. If you stop paying, your credit will take the hit. Legally, you've got 3 main options. 1, keep paying and maintain the status quo. 2, force the sale of the property. Or 3, have your son and daughter-in-law refinance without you. If they can't, you're back to option 1 or 2. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. My phone buzzed again, another text from Michael. "Mom, please." "We really need your help. Susan's so stressed about these bills." The image of Susan in her tennis outfit, smiling beside that pool contractor, flashed in my mind. She hadn't looked stressed at all. That evening, I called Janet, my sister-in-law. If anyone knew the truth, it would be her. "Emma," she said, surprised. Are you okay after the barbecue? I need to ask you something, I said. And I need you to be honest. Has Michael said anything about financial trouble? There was a pause. What kind of trouble? He says they're drowning in bills. They need $8,000 immediately. Janet sighed. Emma, they just put a down payment on a pool. $15,000. Susan's been showing everyone the designs. Her words hit like a physical blow. When? I asked quietly. Last week. She said it was an early anniversary gift. From you. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of that sink in. They weren't just taking advantage of me. They were lying about me, using my name to fund their luxury projects. Emma, are you still there? Yes, I said. My voice calm now, almost too calm. Thank you for telling me. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd balanced checkbooks and written birthday cards for years. I opened the folder from the bank, those cold, unfeeling numbers staring back at me, and finally understood the truth I'd been avoiding. I pulled out my laptop and began listing everything I had ever paid for, every loan that was never repaid, every emergency that drained my savings, every luxury disguised as a necessity. By midnight, I had a spreadsheet, a silent confession of a decade of financial manipulation. It wasn't generosity anymore. It was exploitation. And I was done. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. First, to the bank, to schedule a meeting with a mortgage specialist. Second, to a real estate agent I trusted. It was time to take back control of my life, my finances, and my peace. A week later, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by a mountain of paperwork, mortgage statements, bank records, retirement projections, the entire paper trail of my sacrifice. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. I had spent the week meeting with advisors, attorneys, and agents. I understood every detail of my situation now, and I had made my decision. When the doorbell rang that evening, I was ready. I gathered the documents into a neat folder, straightened my blouse, and walked calmly to the door. Michael and Susan stood on my porch. Neither looked concerned, just irritated. Susan's arms were folded tightly across her designer blouse, her heel tapping impatiently against the step. Michael clutched his phone, as if ready to show me proof of yet another emergency. "Mom," he started, frustration already creeping into his tone. "You haven't answered our calls or texts for over a week. What's going on?" "Come in," I said evenly, stepping aside. They exchanged a wary glance before walking into the living room. Neither of them sat. "We're in serious trouble," Michael said, wasting no time. "The bank is threatening to foreclose." I raised an eyebrow. "Which bank?" "The mortgage is with Summit Financial, and I've made every payment on time." Michael blinked. "I meant our credit cards. We're maxed out. They're threatening legal action." "How much?" He looked down. "About $30,000. "And you want me to pay it?" Susan stepped forward, her voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. "Emma, I know we had a misunderstanding at the barbecue, but this is serious. We could lose everything." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated quietly. "You called me a plague that ruined your lives. Was that what you meant?" Susan's expression flickered. Guilt, then defensiveness. "I was stressed. I say things I don't mean when I'm stressed. Like when you told Janet that the new swimming pool was an early anniversary gift from me." The color drained from Susan's face. Michael looked between us, confused. "What swimming pool?" I turned to him. "You didn't know? About the $15,000 down payment last week?" "I thought her parents helped with that," he stammered. Susan's mask cracked. "My parents wouldn't give us a dime, and you know it." Michael's voice rose. "So you lied to me? We're drowning in debt, and you spent $15,000 on a pool?" "We deserved something nice for once," Susan snapped. "Do you know how it feels to be the only family on the street without one? Do you know what people think?" I watched them argue, as if I wasn't even in the room. It was their same pattern, Susan demanding more, Michael objecting just long enough to ease his conscience, then both of them turning to me when the bills came due. "Enough," I said finally. They both turned to me, startled by the calm authority in my voice. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. "Both of you." They obeyed, sullen and silent. I placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it. "For the past 10 years, I began, I have given you over $300,000. That doesn't include the mortgage payments I've been making on your house, another $150,000. Michael opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "I'm not finished. I've paid for renovations, cars, vacations, private schools, braces, and every so-called emergency. I've drained my retirement savings to support your lifestyle, and in return I've been treated like an ATM at best, and a burden at worst." Susan flushed red. "Is this why you called us here? To throw your generosity in our faces?" "No," I said, my voice even. "I called you here because this ends now." I slid a document across the table toward them. "This is a statement confirming that I've made the final mortgage payment on your house. As of today, I will not make another." Michael's eyes widened. "But we can't afford—" "I'm aware," I interrupted. "That's why I've also filed paperwork to put the house on the market." Susan shot to her feet. "You can't do that. It's our house." "Actually," I said calmly, "it's primarily mine. My name is first on both the deed and the mortgage. I've spoken with attorneys. I have every right to force a sale." Michael's face went pale. "Mom, please. Where would we live?" "That's for you to figure out," I said softly. "You're 40 years old, Michael. It's time to stand on your own." Susan's composure shattered. "You cold-hearted woman," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" I laughed, not cruelly, but genuinely. "What exactly have you done for me, Susan? Go ahead, list one thing." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Nothing came out. "We're family," Michael said weakly. "You can't just abandon us." "I'm not abandoning you," I said. "I'm refusing to enable you. There's a difference." "So that's it?" Susan shouted. "You're throwing us out because of one little comment?" "No, Susan," I said, meeting her glare. "I'm taking back control of my life because of years of manipulation and disrespect. That comment was just the final straw." Michael stood, desperation in his eyes. "Mom, please. We can fix this. I promise. We'll change." I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had sacrificed everything for, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. "I hope you do change," I said softly. "But not for me. For yourself." Susan grabbed her purse, her face twisting with rage. "You'll regret this," she spat. "When you're old and alone, with no one left to care about you, you'll regret it." I met her gaze without flinching. "I'd rather be alone," I said, "than used." Michael stood frozen, caught between his wife's fury and his own guilt. "The real estate agent will contact you tomorrow," I said. "When the house sells, you'll receive 20% of the proceeds, enough for a security deposit and your first month's rent. The rest will go back into my retirement fund." "This isn't over," Susan snapped, storming toward the door. "Come on, Michael." He hesitated, looking at me one last time. "Mom," he whispered. "It's time to grow up, Michael," I said gently. "For both our sakes." As the door slammed shut, the silence that followed felt heavy, but not painful. For the first time in years, it wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the sound of freedom. I sank into my armchair, exhaustion washing over me. But beneath it, a quiet, steady strength. I had finally done it. I had finally chosen myself. The house felt emptier than before, but lighter too. As if a weight I had carried for decades had finally slipped from my shoulders. I had done what needed to be done. Now all that was left was to be strong enough to see it through. A year later, I stood on the small deck of my coastal cottage, watching the sun sink into the ocean, gold melting into pink, pink fading into violet. The breeze off the water was cool and salty, tugging at my shorter hair. I'd stopped dyeing it months ago. At 63, I no longer cared about looking younger for anyone else. For the first time, I was living for me. The 6 months after the confrontation had been the hardest of my life, even harder than when Jim died. Back then, I had purpose. Raising Michael. Protecting what was left of our family. This time, I had to learn who Emma Reynolds was when she wasn't someone's wife, someone's mother, or someone's safety net. The sale of Michael's house had gone through faster than expected. The market had been hot, and despite the half-finished pool that needed to be filled in, the house sold for well above asking price. As promised, I gave Michael and Susan 20%. The rest went into my retirement account. They were furious, of course, Susan especially. She'd whispered her version of the story to anyone who would listen, that I'd turned my back on my own family. Some believed her. I lost friends I thought would stand by me, and for a while, I questioned myself every single day. But slowly, I rebuilt. I sold my old house. Too big, too full of ghosts, and found this quiet cottage by the sea. Close enough to the life I'd known, but far enough to start over. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. "Tea's ready," Dorothy called, carrying 2 steaming mugs out to the deck. She'd been my rock through everything, never judging, always listening. "It's beautiful tonight," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "It always is," I smiled, taking the mug from her hands. We sat in easy silence, watching the horizon fade from gold to indigo. That was one of the quiet gifts of my new life, the peace of simply being without having to tend to everyone else's needs. "Have you heard from Michael?" Dorothy asked softly. I nodded. "He called yesterday." After 3 months of angry silence following the sale, Michael had finally reached out. That first call had been awkward, cautious words, long pauses, but it was a start. Over the past 9 months, we'd been rebuilding something, not the old version of our relationship, where I gave and he took, but something new, something healthy. "He and Susan separated," I said, still a little surprised every time I said it aloud. Dorothy's eyebrows rose. "Really? When?" "About a month ago. He's been staying with a coworker. After losing the house, they moved into an apartment they could barely afford. Without my support, Susan's spending caught up to them. The argument started almost immediately. She blamed him for everything, especially for not standing up to me. And he finally saw her for who she really was." Dorothy nodded slowly. "He asked if he could visit this weekend," I added. "And what did you say?" I said yes. Dorothy gave me a worried look, but I smiled. "Don't worry. We're not going back to how things were. He knows that." In recent months, I'd seen glimpses of the boy I used to know, before the entitlement, before the bitterness. He was working 2 jobs now, living modestly, learning the value of earning his own way. And most importantly, he had apologized, not once, but over and over. I wasn't naive enough to think words could undo years of damage, but I'd seen real remorse, real effort, and that gave me hope. "I'm proud of you, Emma," Dorothy said quietly, squeezing my hand. "I know how hard this year has been." I squeezed back, smiling faintly. The hardest things are usually the most necessary. After she left, I stayed out on the deck, watching stars bloom across the night sky. I thought of the woman I had been a year ago, drained, overlooked, terrified of confrontation, and marveled at how far I'd come. I had started painting again. My cottage walls were filled with my own seascapes and landscapes, color and light reborn after decades of neglect. I'd joined a local book club, made new friends who knew me simply as Emma, not as someone's mother, not as someone's provider. Most importantly, I had rebuilt my financial security. Between the 2 house sales and careful planning, my retirement was safe. I wasn't rich, but I was free. My phone buzzed, a text from Michael. "Looking forward to this weekend. I have some good news to share." I smiled and typed back, "Can't wait to hear it. Drive safe." Our relationship was different now, more balanced, more honest. He still called sometimes for advice, but never for money. We were learning to be family again, without the chains of guilt or debt. Susan still refused to speak to me. But that was her choice. I'd made peace with it. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. Inside, my cottage glowed warm with lamplight. I walked through the small rooms, each corner arranged exactly as I wanted. No compromises, no permission needed. On my bedside table sat 2 photos, one of Jim, smiling as he always had. And beside it, a new one, Michael and me at Christmas, our first holiday together after everything. His smile had been hesitant, mine, cautious, but it was real, and that was what mattered. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused. The woman staring back was older, yes, with silver in her hair and lines etched by laughter and pain, but there was something else too. Strength, peace, a quiet pride. "You did it," I whispered to my reflection. "You built a home for yourself, not for anyone else. And this time, this life, was truly, completely mine."